So this week's vlog I'm going to look at dairy to beef systems and really just a couple of key points on them. I've done a lot of work with dairy to beef systems over the last couple of years, had some successes in looking for bottlenecks, but really I want to point out some key challenges at the moment. Well, obviously everyone knows we have 1.6 million dairy cows calving down this year. We have a surplus of calves and we need to work on that, but I'm going to focus on just with this in this one on a couple of challenges. But you know, quality and genetics are really important, and obviously there's a lot of work been done on that, and it's really good to see. But health and welfare, particularly animal health, is really important when it comes to dairy to beef systems. And of course they have to be profitable, sustainable for farmers themselves, and that depends on markets. And there's some challenges coming around live exports and stuff, and I think dairy to beef systems, when they're done really well, work well. Now, one of the key things I want to talk about, really key point is, and I've been talking about this for a long time, and you know, it's the idea of our source farms and our dairy to beef enterprise and the sourcing of calves from those farms. Now, there's two areas. There's an opportunity for your dairy to beef system, but there's also an opportunity for your source farm when it comes to quality in a marketplace that's quite crowded, to improve animal health and quality. But the big issue that I have on farms is when the calves get to the dairy to beef enterprise, how they get there. So if we look at our source farms and we look at direct supply in, the thing about calves is consistency. Consistency in feeding in between the two farms, consistency, environment, reducing stress. But if we can directly source calves, it has to be the best option. And the big driver will be, and I've done a lot of dairy to beef systems over the years where calves on arrival got antibiotics, prophylactic antibiotics, and it works reasonably well along with vaccination and everything else. But with our need to reduce antibiotic usage, new legislation which will be against prophylactic treatment of animals to prevent, so treating animals with antibiotics to prevent disease, we're not going to be doing that under new legislation. So we need to think differently. And I've worked in all sorts of systems, and I've seen how the system from source farms direct to dairy enterprise work really well once the source farms do some work as well. But if you look at multiple source farms, and even with multiple source farms going into dairy enterprises, they work. But you obviously, if you can get larger farms where you get larger numbers, that work well. But when you have multiple source farms coming through the like of a mart and then on to dairy, you have this just will not work for me, and this is my challenge. I've been saying it for a while. This mixing of animals here creates enormous stress, and that stress is just an inevitable part of transport. Plus, when you mix groups of animals together when they're stressed, they're more likely to be shedding viruses and disease, and you have longer transit times. It's a more complicated process. And if we were going to look at reducing antibiotics, particularly in dairy to beef systems, my own feeling is, and this won't happen overnight, and it's not always very popular thing to say, this system is really going to be difficult to manage. And I've tried over the years to look at this and how you can do it. But this to me, and this is what I'm going to talk about, is source farms going direct into dairy to beef enterprises. Now, the source farms have an opportunity here. High health status, what's that even mean? Focus on animal health on the farms, that the calves, before they're travelling, have got particularly colostrum, coccidiosis is managed, maybe even vaccines before they travel, but there's a high health status and vaccines that we're using the farm, controlling your main respiratory pathogens, especially when we consider pneumonia to me being the big risk. Now, I'm not saying scour isn't either, but for dairy to beef systems, pneumonia was the big risk. Colostrum. So more farms are going to have to look at showing other farms what they've done. So if you go into a garage to buy a used car, the idea that you have information, the more information you have, the more trust you have in that. I'm not suggesting calves are like cars, but it's that same principle that the farm of origin will have information to back up the health status of their calves, and that has to add value. I think we're really failing if it doesn't. Colostrum, ZSTs, colostrum being the absolute key building block for calf health. If calves don't get colostrum, they struggle, whether it be in dairy systems or in beef systems. But colostrum is key, and looking at, you know, some sort of random ZST test, serum protein's been done to showcase that these calves have got colostrum. I think that's the future. That's where we need to be. And then transport distances. If you're getting from source farms, the closer you are to those source farms, the better. For me, this is a big challenge, and this is probably, I suppose, the big issue that I want to raise in my blog this week, is about how we're sourcing calves. If we're going to reduce antibiotic usage, this is the way to go forward. The opportunities for the source farm is the add value, you know, a market, you're increasing welfare and health, sustainable, better money, and with the challenge of AMR, I think it's the way to go. Then the big next step for calves when they arrive on farm is the arrival. That's so you have the transport, the distances, the time, the animal stocking densities, effort been put into that. There's some really good people doing good work around that. You know, the better you can do that, the more comfortable farms, calves arrive on farm. Calves love consistency, so you're transferring from one to the other. And an interesting area actually, just to say, where I see this work well is obviously dairy calves been reared, contract reared, and that could be from 2 or 3 farms or 1 farm. Where they're coming direct, you see not a huge amount of issues. It's the sourcing is the issue. Last time I'll say it. Okay, so the arrival on farm is critical. You know, what do we do with calves? Calf signals, you know, really understand, looking at calves, obviously the ideal thing would be temperature checking, but looking for snotty noses, listening for coughing, ears down, assessing. Some calves will need treatments on arrival, but that we should be minimizing that down. Fluids on arrival, depending on how far they've traveled, you know, how quickly they go on to milk. Consistency in the routine. What milk replacer were they on? What concentrates were they on? Can we do something around keeping those things consistent for the calf? If you're changing milk volumes and concentrations, if you're changing a different meal, all these small little things can make such a difference. Immunity and stress, minimizing down the stress, maximizing immunity and arrival. The first 24 hours, how you manage calves. Now in dairy to beef systems, it has to be said vaccination pays, particularly with pneumonia vaccination. Now everyone say what vaccine should you use, what type. I worked in different systems where we've chosen different vaccines. In your short term, intranasal vaccines work well for calves. I think they given to healthy calves, they work really well. You know, the future could be source farms doing the vaccine, so they've got immune stimulation before they arrive on. But vaccination is critical to build a solid health plan. If we can get these calves started, we can get them off and running. Now you've heard me talking about these other things in other blogs and will hear me talk about them, but feeding consistency around milk replacer, dairy to beef, some people will push to get them weaned quicker. I think milk feeding from a feed efficiency point, so that's a kilo of solids going into the calf versus a kilo of solids in the back, you never get such efficiency. So I'm inclined to always slow down that rush to wean and do it over a sustained period of time. Again, your crunchy, your nut, your concentrated calves are going on, making sure that's palatable, that they're eating enough of it, and it's the right mixture. The environment the calves are in are critical. Stocking density, the sheds, air, ventilation, drainage, get that right, and you know, these simple things will get those calves off to the best start. And then it's all about hygiene maybe out here, and then building up to weaning time. I suppose for me, this blog really today was about looking at 2 critical areas. If you can get number 1, 2 and 3 right, getting the right calves directly onto farm, having them arrive correctly, getting your vaccination protocol either from the source farm right or yourselves, it can make a massive difference to dairy to beef. I think there's certainly big challenges out here. That's AMR, antibiotic reduction, is just one of them, and we need to get better and think about these systems to make sure they're sustainable and profitable for farmers with high health status, good welfare, and that is for the source calves as well. So it's an important area. We're going to be rearing more calves. Farmers need to think about this all the time, and having a proper plan in place to me is absolutely key.